Everybody, I'd like to call the regular council meeting of Tuesday, April 11th to order. Respectfully acknowledging that this meeting is being held on a traditional territory of the Platte people. We have approval of the agenda as presented. All in favor? Adoption of the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held March 28th, 2020. By Council Catswell, seconded by Councilor. Minutes of the regular council meeting held March 28th were adopted by Councilor Robertson, seconded by Councilor Hipper. Favor. No delegations and requests. So we have business of rising, the council action item report for March 28th for business. Correspondence from the Honorable Minister Adrian Hicks, Minister of Health for the Emergency Department of the Port Hardy Hospital Services in the Mount White region. A response to our letter that was sent from them.
It's just great what's being done here, the funding that's good. Really, I mean, nothing happens instantly, but it's yeah. So
Was there? I was trying to remember, but did they have funding available not just for incentives for new people, but they had something for people that have been working through all this thick and thin and sticking around to
Yes, so
compensate them for all their hard work and dedication?
they have compensated various levels, nurses, healthcare aides that are currently working and have continued to work.
Yeah.
They have been compensating them, and there's a form when you go on the website that Vancouver Island Health has created. If you go onto their website, you can see how much has been spent and where it's been spent. They've also, with the staff that are currently here, if they also give them a little bonus. Anyone that's new that's come here has gotten a little bonus for coming, and so it's just all part of the recruitment and the retention of the current staff.
It's a lot of good things. Just it takes time.
It does take time, and remember at the last regional district meeting there was quite a good report, and I'm hoping that next week when at the regional district we'll have an update what's been going on. Just took a little while for committee reports. We have draft minutes of the Port Hardy Emergency Committee meeting held on March 27th, 2023 for information. Any comments?
About the emergency?
Yeah.
Yes, as you can see, we're planning an exercise, a small exercise in Port Hardy. And we're going to wrinkle up some of the kinks of where we open it up to a bigger audience. And then maybe down the road, we'll look at a big table talk exercise with the regional district and everybody. And just a reminder that the tsunami week is April 9th to the 15th. Over. Good.
Staff reports, the finance department, the March 2023 check and EFT listing.
Speak up just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
We're having some technical difficulties on lines.
Is that better?
Maybe because I'm loud.
But it's right here in front of me.
No, it's,
Oh, it's that one there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, maybe
Sorry.
move that,
Hair closer.
Yeah.
Hair closer and then test.
you can,
because usually it's just Tammy that says anything that I'm not loud enough.
When Dennis does a meeting, we can hear.
so you just.
That's better is what I'm hearing.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, so it's funny because people say I project my voice, but obviously not well enough in here. So, under staff reports, the finance department, the March 2023 check and EFT listening report for information. Any comments, questions? And then we move on to some of the EFTs. Ross Blackwell, Director of Corporate Development Services, Deputy CAO, for our DFP-06-2022-6715 Bear Falls Highway. Corporate and Development Services, would you like to take over?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a very straightforward application to vary the the maximum gross floor area for a carriage home. Excuse me, it's only a minor amendment, as you can see in the report. From a planning perspective, given the size of the property, given the rural context, the look, the feel, the massing of this minor increase will have no significant visible effect. And on that basis, from a planning perspective, there is no concern. Accordingly, it's the staff recommendation that the application be approved.
Thank you. So the recommendation that council approve development variance permit DFP-060-2022 to vary the provision of section 3.11C2 of zoning bylaw number 1010-2013 to increase the maximum gross floor area for a carriage home dwelling as set out in zoning bylaw number 1010-2013 from 90 square meters to 115.6 meters squared. And further, that the corporate officer be authorized to execute the permit accordingly.
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tidbury. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, going on again with our Director of Corporate Development Services, Deputy CAO. Read the DFP-01-2023-5930 Carnarvon Place.
Councilor Dugas.
Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, I have to remove myself from this of conflict of interest, so I'll just get out and then I'll come back in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this matter before you has the appearance of being benign and may well be somewhat benign, but it also has a significant precedent component to it. And the precedent component is this. There's a front yard setback associated with this type of zoning. Setbacks are provided for the purpose of achieving certain goals with regard to the placement of the front door, let's say the front facade of the building. Such things as having sufficient parking area for vehicles in the front of the building, as well as just simple separation between houses on opposite sides of the street for reasons of privacy. Those are some of the examples of why we have front yard setbacks. The application before you is to reduce that by 50%, which is a heck of a big number. Now, it's less of a big number in terms of impact, depending on what we're talking about. In this case, it's a deck, but it sets a precedent. The precedent is you're relaxing the front yard setback by 50% for a structure. A deck is a structure. So is, a range of other sorts of buildings. They're also structures. So it's not that council is bound by this decision in any respect, but it is important to keep in mind that this is a bit of a precedent. This is not a deck that is going to be constructed at ground level. It's intended to replace the concrete stairs. So it will be elevated by roughly 3.5 feet from the surface of the ground, which makes its visual impact greater than if it was at ground level, which it would be, in that case, almost invisible. There are ways to reduce the impact. I've discussed those in the report. It's either, through landscaping or skirting, or a combination of the two can help reduce kind of the visual impact, excuse me, of decking by softening that edge, as well as to avoid or reduce the opportunity to use decking as a storage area. Whether it's the current applicant or potential property owners down the road that may choose to store whatever underneath that deck, and then thus becoming a bit of an eyesore. That said, let's not forget that a person can park their RV or a large boat in their front yard, which is also, it's not a structure, but it has a visual impact. So this one is not a black and white issue by any means. We have received 4 letters. Apparently the applicant is a very good neighbor, because he has had 4 of his neighbors speak in favor of this request to vary the front yard setback. So that bodes well, always being a good neighbor. So, on that basis, there's really very little more I can add. The recommendation is before you. I've included a number of images to show or reflect what I'm talking about. Image number 1 sort of reflects how that decking can be softened through landscaping. Number 2 is skirting. Number 3 is sort of how it would look in terms of its height. That's roughly 3.5 feet. That's the sort of look that would accompany that. So the recommendation before you is that it be approved subject to some sort of screening, left essentially to the discretion of the applicant, either in terms of landscape screening or skirting, just to reduce that visual impact, reduce the opportunity for the decking structure to be used down the road for storage, even though I should point out it's not the intent of the current applicant to do so. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Questions, Councillor?
Thanks, Ross. And the only thing I was going to say was, and thank you in the report, was that the part, and you already mentioned it, that stuck out to me was that the neighbors are all comfortable with it and are good to go with it. So from my perspective, that is as important as anything. So that works for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Councillor Chipper?
I'm in motion.
Second with Councillor Collard. I think my only comment is the neighbors are in favor. The proponent is a great neighbor and it's great, but what if they sell the house? And as our Director of Corporate and Development Services say, it's down the road, and making sure that there's either skirting or softening landscaping. So was that discussed at all?
What's part of the motion? The last part of the motion.
Yeah,
Subject to screening of the sides of the deck structure.
that's what I see. The last line.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong
Last,
motion.
very last
My
line.
apologies. In that case, I'd like to ask, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. If I could just offer this, just to clarify, I did broach the subject with the applicant. He indicated that it was not his intention to screen it, but I had the feeling, and he could speak to the issue better than I, but I got the feeling that it was not something he contemplated. So I can't tell you that he was either not in favor of having to do that or was in favor. It wasn't clear either way, just to point that out.
I think they look all great.
Thank you.
Hanging basket there and be fine.
Any other comments, questions? All right, and that, so the motion has been made. CAO's Nelson Smith, do I have to read the whole recommendation out?
That's why I did the motion.
That, I know, so I'm just wondering if I have to read the whole one out, even though it's been moved and seconded.
If council is comfortable with the written recommendation on the paper and that that's what will be accepted as the motion, then you don't need to read it.
So there has been a first and seconder, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. You're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but if you want to, bow out, you can bow out too.
Thank you.
Oh,
You can.
so long.
You get more riveting.
Yeah, this is good. Our busy as a beaver corporate person.
Yes. Mr. Blackwell, you've been very busy, and so now we're talking about DP-01-2023-9025 on Granville Street.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. The matter before you here is with regard to the former Shell gas station site. This is a form and character development permit pursuant to the Midtown DP area designated as DP area number 2. There's an application that's come forward pursuant to those DP guidelines. I can advise that the application to build the McDonald's building is consistent with the zoning. So land use is not a question. It's simply a question of conformance with the development permit guidelines. Now, before I kind of walk you through what has been proposed, I will just point out a couple of things to remind folks that may not be familiar with the provisions of form and character development permit guidelines, because there are very few that come forward. So in essence, development permits like building permits are non-discretionary on the part of council, which means that council is bound to approve an application that ticks all of the development permit guideline tick boxes. If, however, council feels that one or more of the guidelines is not appropriately addressed, council has the authority to reject the development permit by either refusing it or redirecting it back to staff for further design development. So there is a little bit of latitude with regard to that. Now, the operative concept here is reasonable. So it's not common, particularly with more complicated form and character development permit guidelines. This is not particularly complicated, but it's not complicated at all. But for particularly complicated ones, it's not common for development concepts to not be able to tick all the tick boxes. Some of these guidelines are inherently impossible to address relative to any given project. So by extension, that may apply to this location as well. As part of the preamble, I should also point out this. From a planning perspective, this proposed use is a service commercial land use, not a downtown or commercial sort of scale, massing, forming character, etc. It's service commercial. Port Hardy does not have any service commercial. What do I mean by service commercial? Well, Campbellton and Campbell River, Highway 19A through Campbellton, that's sort of a service commercial field. Tire shops, gas stations, light industry, that sort of thing. That's the feel of a service commercial. Lumber yards, card locks, these are all sorts of service commercial types of activities. We don't really have that in Port Hardy within the commonly understood area that's commercial. That said, we have this area in Port Hardy that actually functions like that. So this section of Granville that has Chevron, Home Hardware, and other things, but just focus on Home Hardware, co-op, car dealership, that's effectively service commercial. So even though we have a Midtown or midtown slash, it's effectively a downtown development permit area. What we have there is not that. It doesn't meet that. I'd go further to say that the Shell gas station that was on here is service commercial. So although this type of McDonald's also is a service commercial, I just point out that it's no significant deviation from the previous land use, as well as what's actually going on in this section of road now. In a perfect planner's world, if there is such a thing, and you may not want to imagine it. In fact, I don't know if I would want to imagine it. In this part of the community, you wouldn't want to see what we have there, but there's no other place to put it. So this is a question of how do you massage a land use like service commercial into an area that's not designed for it. So Chevron has done a lot of landscaping. The development with the home next door, the Home Hardware, etc., has also done a lot of landscaping to sort of bridge the gap between a downtown sort of land use and really what is normally just an expanse of asphalt. They've done a fair bit to try to compensate. So too with the co-op. And I think as I'm going to walk you through this tonight, so too, to the extent it can, has McDonald's. Before I kind of get into the DP guidelines, are there any questions of council at this point? No. Okay. So I won't spend much time walking through the development permit guidelines. You'll see in the report what they are intended to address. The notion of this walkable, pedestrian, kind of aesthetically attractive type of form and character. I've touched on that. That's not particularly doable in this location because of the gas stations, car dealership, et cetera, et cetera. If we all of a sudden parachuted something in to this site that looked like that, it would stand out as this analogous or this dissonant sort of building topology in the middle of this otherwise service commercial row of land uses. So that really, from a planning perspective, starts to change the degree to which one can reasonably, and that's the important word, reasonably expect a given project to be able to reflect the ability to meet the forming character guidelines. With that in mind, what I can tell you is that from a planning perspective, it largely does. So as you can see in the attached drawings, you'll see a number of drawing sheets that show the architecture, that'll show the signage program, that'll show the landscaping program, the site circulation program. You'll notice a few things. So I'll start with site. It's not going to be in order. I'll start with site circulation. You'll notice that the site, the McDonald's site, is proposed to have access egress on the west side of the property, adjacent to the car dealership. Egress is focused primarily on the east side, as you'll see in the drawing. The reason for doing this or the benefit of doing this from an urban design perspective is this. The access egress point on the west side is going to be wider, which is more problematic for pedestrians, but there also has to be sufficient radius for a truck turning movement. And this may not mean anything to you, but a turning template of a WB40, which is a tractor trailer unit, which is the commonly seen McDonald's trucks on the road with a refrigerated trailer and the truck. That's the size of vehicle I would expect to come to the site. Entering the site, it has to make a fairly sharp turn. There's not a lot of room from that one lane turning onto the site. So that driveway access is going to be wider. It's unavoidable. But the egress leaving the site through discussions, we've been able to agree that they will narrow that up because Granville is arguably functionally 4-lane cross section in that location. So there is the ability for a vehicle leaving the site to start its vehicle turning tracking within the road right of way rather than having to start it on the site itself. which means you're able to narrow the egress. This is a good thing for pedestrians. You'll notice also that how they've oriented the drive-through facility. You again access the driveway, the drive-through driveway on the west side of the property. It moves to the south end of the site, curls back around to where you receive your order on the east side. You'll notice then from that sort of takeaway window, there are 2 parking stacking stalls in the front of the building. Ideally, it would be nice to remove those so that one is able to move the McDonald's facade closer to the front of this to the frontage and improve that pedestrian connection. We had a conversation about a parallel stacking lane that would run beside the main driveway lane. And to a degree, I would argue to a degree that might be achievable, but then there are also sacrifices with that. The sacrifice being you would then have to widen the egress again. So now you're back to a wider egress. So it's not optimal to have those 2 vehicle stacking spots, which are designed for waiting for orders in that location. What we discussed, and I should point this out, the drawing sheets that you see are not reflective of these changes I'm talking about, which is going to be something I'm going to speak about with regard to the recommendation. So on Friday afternoon, I had these conversations with the designers. And so the compromise was to include the design of a speed table that would give primacy, visual or aesthetic primacy, as well as tactile primacy to the pedestrian coming from the sidewalk location to the front of the store. So this is an elevated speed table that would denote that primacy. So that's, I think, from a planning and urban design perspective, given these considerations, that's as good as it's going to get. What else can I tell you about this site layout? Let's see, not too much. So let me move just to the form and character component, which is the building design. You're going to see it's a fairly generic corporate typology. There's not a lot of room to really maneuver that design in terms of building massing, which is the orientation of the building on the site. For instance, what does massing look like? Well, 2 stories versus 1 story is building massing. There's not a lot of room to fool around with the massing. There's not a lot of room to fool around with the design. In other words, if there was direction to, I don't know, decorporatize, if that's a thing, the design, where would you take it? Cloverdale has a log cabin motif in its McDonald's. I'm not sure that that's a good design, but that's subjective. You get what you get with these packaged corporate designs. I think what they're proposing from a design perspective is all right. It's not fantastic, but it's all right relative to what it is as a fast food store. In terms of its materiality, it's going to be the type of materials utilized for the cladding are a combination of sort of warm colors as well as a cleaner, more modern look, which I think will be good in this location. It will not be out of keeping with any of the structures in this location. Some being quite old. If you look across the road to the mall, I think it would even complement that sort of older architecture. So the design components, although not ideal with regard to sort of these downtown urban design goals, they're not dramatically dissonant with them either. So moving back to landscaping, I think there's been some positive discussions on Friday with regard to adjusting the landscaping. You'll see the site plan. You'll notice along the west property line in particular, so right up against the car dealership, you'll see a long row of, I have the report up, so I can't really see what you're looking at there. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so you'll see along the west property line, that row of parking. In my discussions, I suggested that they look at converting 1 out of every 6 to 7 of those stalls into a little landscape planting bed, and in planting one of those Acer rubrum red points, which are the trees that we've planted currently last year and the year before down gravel in front of the car dealership. So it would continue that motif in terms of that tree planting, but it also softens up that parking lot area by installing those trees. So those landscape beds would number in the order of about 6 to 7, which would, I think, really improve the feel of that parking area, if you will. The other key landscaping areas are along the front property line, as well as by the drive-through order window. They're not over the top, but they're reasonable, particularly in view of the location. Of course, with landscaping comes maintenance. So if you have too much landscaping relative to maintenance, it starts to look the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. So finding the right amount of landscaping relative to the ability to maintain it in a location where there's not a heck of a lot of landscapers is an important consideration. Signage, there's a generic sign program for McDonald's. I think another significant concession the McDonald's has agreed to is with regard to the monument sign. So drawing set version 1.0 came with a monument sign at the front property line between the two driveways, right adjacent to the sidewalk. And it was roughly, I'm guesstimating, 12 feet high. Version 2.0 was, I would guesstimate, somewhere around 6 feet high. Version 3.0, it's gone altogether. So that's the right thing to do in a location like this. You know, this service commercial / downtown sort of tension. It's not a monument sign advertising McDonald's is not necessary in this location. There will be enough other signage on the building to convey what the store is if the smell doesn't. So I think that's a very big deviation for McDonald's, and you know, I acknowledge them for being receptive with regard to the design program to find, you know, some of these interventions that can allow this project to better adapt to its location. Lighting, there is a lighting scheme. The drawings are in front of you. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at that. I got that late Friday. But the key provisions of the DP guidelines are set out in the report. There are 3 sort of key considerations: that lighting not generate light spill onto adjacent properties, even though other lighting does. We don't want that on this one. The lighting is pedestrian scale, and backlit signs are not considered kosher. Well, McDonald's uses backlit signs primarily. You can't get away from that unless you want to hold the line. Pedestrian scale lighting, that is going to be woven into the design, but so too are the parameters around ensuring that there's sufficient lumens at the ground level in regard to the parking and driving area for vehicular safety. So that won't be pedestrian scale lighting because it's not for pedestrians, it's for vehicles. So I would say overall, the lighting scheme does, with everything considered, generally follow the intent of the DP guidelines in respect of lighting, albeit not perfectly. What have I got left? I think I have covered off all of the key pieces. You'll note in the recommendation, I use specific language, and that is be approved as proposed rather than approved as submitted. I do not recommend that the DP be approved as submitted, because as submitted, you have the drawings in front of you. I think it needs to be, from a planning and urban design perspective, if council is minded to approve it, it be approved as proposed, which is reflective of all of these amendments I've touched on, or revisions I've touched on, as of Friday afternoon. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Councilor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. A lot of work, and I have to say, I suspect I'm not unlike other councillors who have had lots of comments made to them about the potential of McDonald's coming to town. lots of comments, and clearly it's not just one day we have a lot and the next day we have a McDonald's. There seems to be a lot of work beforehand. So thank you for the report and for this presentation. And my only question actually, and if I missed it, my apologies, is there somewhere within their proposal that acknowledges the traditional territory where they're going to be located?
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Robertson, I'm assuming let me move my report out of the way. No. There's none.
Was it a topic of discussion that they didn't want to do it, or was it?
It's a great question. I was not a topic that was broached. This was sort of a very, let's call it a very energized effort to move this forward. They have an ambitious construction schedule. They want to open in the fall. So I tried to find the middle ground between balancing kind of the generic corporate design typology that they drop in place across the country for this type of module, which is a function of the size of the community, et cetera. They're scaled relative to context and size, relative to some of these issues I wanted to try to resolve. That was not one. I didn't go take it down that road because that opens up a whole other area of, so what would it be? Who do we have to consult with? And I just don't see that relative to their ambitious construction schedule. And by the way, I can tell you that the building permit drawings have been in at the district for 2 weeks. They want to get going now. As soon as this DP is issued, they're going to start with marshaling the contractors, et cetera. So that would be my concern. As laudable and as beautiful as that could end up being, that is one of the considerations that I was aware of.
I just think it's something that could happen concurrently.
I would be happy to mention that to them when I speak to them.
Thank you. That was my question, actually.
Anything else? Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Ross. It's such a pleasure listening to you and your knowledge, and I'm very grateful that we have that knowledge, especially the golden arches, even like noticing that they wouldn't work in our downtown area. So thank you for going to bat for our community in that way. And it looks very complicated and a lot of work. Thank you, Ross.
Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that. I know how going through all these plans, how tedious they can be. Just one question I was just looking at when I was looking through these, where it was this, like the sidewalk. I noticed they got to a crosswalk going through, and then it looks like they're gonna be building a sidewalk alongside of it. Is there gonna be any kind of, I think you might have mentioned it, but like a future actual sidewalk running right through, or are they just relying on what's down by Esso right now to go across and get to them? Co-op, sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. It's something I didn't touch on. That was part of the discussion on Friday. So we had a discussion about I touched on it in terms of the width of those driveway crossings, and it being a location that you can expect to receive lots of pedestrian traffic. So if the driveway let down is oriented toward the cars, and I'll give you a scenario. Think about the intersection at the top of the hill. There's a right turn bay, right by the car dealership. What's the fastest you could make that corner without having to slow down and still feel reasonably in control? 60K, 70K, 80K. So where I'm going with this, the larger the turning radius, the faster you can make that turning, the turn. So if you shrink that down, if you take a turning radius from say 12 meters, that intersection there is probably closer to, I don't know, I would hazard a guess 16, 18 meters in that location. If you take that down to say 3 to 4 meters, and it's almost then a right angle turn, You are physically forced to slow right down to say 10 or 15K. Otherwise, you just can't make the turning movement. That's the speed you want in order to protect pedestrians if there is a pedestrian vehicle conflict. So this was the conversation I had. So it's balancing turning radius of delivery trucks, the consideration of vehicles being able to also turn in way faster, the width of the crossing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we agreed that they would try to find, again, middle ground to address that in an approach that's similar to what COAP has done with regard to the avoidance of letdowns, as you see in the image, which if you look carefully at the letdowns, and presume that everyone knows what a letdown is, if you look at the detail of the letdown, it's designed to actually orient pedestrians into the center of Granville Street. Tactile, so if you have visual impairment, you're using a cane, based on the angle of that letdown, it's orienting you to walk straight into the middle of the road, not to the across the driveway. That's a very old and common design flaw, I would argue. Many, if not most, communities have moved away from that a long time ago. That was part of the conversation we had. Yeah, there you go. So you'll see, let's say on the far east side of the site or on that island, you see the orientation of those letdowns. Again, they're steering the pedestrian into the center of Granville Street. Now that's one thing if you're, 30 years of age and got great eyesight. It's another thing if you are visually impaired and you're having to use the ground slopes to orient yourself. So anyway, their commitment was to get rid of those large turning radii and the orientation of those letdowns and mirror what COAP has done, which you will see orients pedestrians to movement straight across the driveway. It's elevated because it's a curb and gutter rather than driveway letdown application. So it sort of straddles it being a sidewalk and it also being a driveway access. It's kind of the middle ground. So although not optimal, it's an attempt to find that middle ground like the COAP has done. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then just the only other question was basically just like if they were planning on putting a sidewalk right across Granville Street there, just relying on the one that's down at Co-op to.
I see. No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
Councilor Dover.
That actually brought up in my mind a question about pedestrian crossings, like the nearest pedestrian crossing is about 120 meters south, the pedestrian controlled flashing lights. We don't currently have at the top of Granville and Douglas, we don't have a way to cross to that side of the street. And I know I've brought it up before, but maybe we need to have a more serious look at it because I feel like there will be substantial pedestrian traffic there. And people are going to jaywalk in that. It's a bit of a blind corner if you're coming down
And
the
it's a
hill.
wide.
It's wide and yeah, we don't want people crossing there, so. It's not exactly to do with this DVP, but
But it's
a
something we-
consideration.
Yeah.
So if there's some way we can resolve.
Thank you. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. If I could, through to you, to Councillor Dorwood. There have been ongoing conversations at a staff level with regard to that intersection. It's not lost on me nor anyone else, I suppose, that the district has just spent a lot of money in the construction of a new sidewalk there. So we're not sort of secretly hiding the notion that we want pedestrians to be on that because we put a new sidewalk in there. That intersection is far too big. I alluded to the fact that you can make turning movements in that intersection at 60, 70 kilometers an hour. That's not the correct design speed for that intersection. That intersection does not need right turn bays like we have there. So I would argue to fix that, the intersection needs to be redesigned and reconstructed. It's just not a safe intersection for cars nor pedestrians.
Thank you. That answer that we're gonna
Well, it
have to
answers
look
the
at the intersection.
long-term question, but maybe in the short term, we could install some crosswalks.
We used to, just for your information, Ross, we used to have 2 crosswalks. One, where the flashing light is right now, across from Home Hardware. And then one on the other side of the road, closer to where the co-op is right now. And, maybe with what's going on, not only with the proposed, development, but with co-op as well being, much bigger and renovated, that maybe we should look at another crosswalk in that area again. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So that is certainly a conversation I'm happy to have with Cam. I know that, and maybe Heather has more information that's up to date with regard to if and where any budget exists for doing an overlay in that area. There's an issue with the road cross section in that area. The issue being there are 2 pieces of road, the old piece and the new piece. The new piece was really not constructed properly. And there is inadequate asphalt. I think there's as little as an inch of asphalt covering the soil, which is why you see so much deformation and alligatoring. So there was the notion of repairing that in association with the co-op development, which is why you see that big lip on the rollover curb as you enter the Home Hardware. It's because that's going to be fixed. So maybe it's conversations I'll have, or maybe that we can take a look at some other additional crosswalk in that location. I would advise that it would be problematic to have an unilluminated crosswalk. It's not safe. People, when you have a crosswalk, crosswalks are actually deemed to be dangerous, if you can believe it or not. And the reason is pedestrians too frequently think that they have the right to cross regardless, because there's stripes on the road, so everyone's going to stop for me. 2 of the things in a road right away that are the most dangerous are bicycle lanes and crosswalks, because of that psychology. It changes a little bit when you put flashing lights on there, like we have. So part of that discussion might be whether there's any budget or room to, if there is an opportunity to install a sidewalk or a crosswalk there, which would be great. I think McDonald's is going to get a lot of foot traffic, that we also have lighting, pedestrian activated lights.
Thank you. Councillor, Tipper.
I'd like to see a sidewalk right from the top, right down all along that side there, personally. I agree with Ross about the crosswalks. Too many crosswalks, to me, is just a disaster to think about, because yes, a pedestrian thinks he has the right of way on the road. So the less crosswalks would be happy by me, but definitely I'd like to see a sidewalk on that side.
Yes, Ross?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Tidbury. There have been discussions since the co-op about how we might leverage through negotiation the continuation of a sidewalk right up to the intersection, not least of which because the design of that road cross section is such that the water orients itself over to the south side of the road. And if you may recall seeing on the former Shell site, kind of that water running right into the middle of the Shell property, because there's no curb and gutter to catch it. So there has been ongoing discussion about how we can work with what's going on to maybe, have something happen with regard to extending that up to the corner. So we're still playing with that as a possibility.
Okay, Councillor Tipper.
And the other coin is coming off the highway and turning down that way. If the driver notices that there's no other vehicle in the cross section, Okay, normally they're coming down that hill pretty fast too. So which is nice to, what in the design is to narrow that portion, so they have to slow down more.
You take it away.
I'll take it away.
Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, take it away. That, I'd be okay with that too.
I've just, in the last, say, 10 minutes, I've heard, about sidewalks, intersecting asphalt and all sorts of things. I think probably one thing can't be done in isolation of everything else, and that it sort of will bear some discussion about the whole area and the whole, what to do altogether. That complements each other, not trying to do one thing at a time that may or may not work. So I think it's a good topic of conversation, a discussion that we need to have led by somebody who's a planner. Apologies.
And the director of operations.
Or director of operations, but anyway, that encompasses the whole area and what needs to do from our perspective. So, and I look forward to having that discussion.
Thanks.
And I totally agree with what Fred's saying. It's, but as we're building now, we need to, before we go any much further, maybe we need to look at this a little more.
Well, I'm just thinking perhaps our Director of Corporate and Development Services, when he's talking to McDonald's, assuming this permit is approved, that there was much discussion about sidewalks in front of their property, and maybe they could look at putting a sidewalk in right across the front of their property.
There will be. There will be a sidewalk across McDonald's. Trying to look at the ability to capitalize on having equipment there to maybe just take it up the rest of the way up the hill. It's not very far and it just completes it. Rather than have that gap tooth smile for the next 20 years.
So that would be really good. So if you could have that conversation and then bring it back to our next operations or whenever our committee of the whole with the operations and public works, that would be great. So I just wanted to make one comment before I go on to the two other gentlemen, and then maybe if anyone else who hasn't made a comment would like to make any comments or questions. Thank you very much for all your hard work. And I really appreciate hearing about the sign and going from 12 feet to 6 feet to nothing. Because when I drove down and I was looking at the other signs that are up there, and I thought, okay, well, if it's 6 feet, it could kind of go like Home Hardware's got that big sign, and Chevron and Co-op, they've all got these big signs, but McDonald's is kind of stands out on its own too, and so that's great that they're willing to do that. So thank you very much for all your hard work and doing it as quickly as it's possible, and also for you and our CAO to let us know as the mayor and council with all the questions that we've been directed at, that what our role is and what we are allowed to do. And that made it really much easier to answer any questions from the public. So thank you.
Yeah, I second that. There's a lot of questions and stuff, especially after certain news articles made it out.
Yeah.
And the fact that especially Heather, I was able to talk to her and found exactly what our role is, because there was a lot of mistruths about what we are doing in here about it. So yes,
Yes,
second that. Thank you guys for that.
You have anything?
No, just back on the crosswalk thing, like right now, the only crosswalks are down by Home Hardware and then up by the primary care to actually access that other side of the street. So while I agree that there's some improvements needed, I think in the short term, we need to look at crossing over to that newly built sidewalk at the intersection of Granville and Douglas. And onto that side. Otherwise, I feel like we're gonna have people jaywalking and it's a blind hill. And anyway, so anyway, in case that wasn't reiterated well enough my first time.
Ross?
Thank you through to Councillor Dorwood. You have my commitment. I'll continue to do what I can to work on making that happen. It's nothing that can be dealt with directly in the context of this DP, but it is
Yeah.
something that needs to be folded in, as said so eloquently by several people now. Absolutely needs to be folded in if we are intending to really have a walkable, safe community that is accessible by everybody, including the able-bodied and those that are not able-bodied. So you have my commitment to work on that.
Sure. Counselor Tidbert?
No, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Counselor Smith, did you have any comments?
Nothing further, that was.
Okay. Counselor Robertson, you had your hand up?
No, I was just gonna move it.
Okay. So it's been moved and second that the development permit application 01-2023 be approved as proposed. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. That was a very robust conversation and discussion. All right, next item, Heather Nelson Smith, Chief Administrative Officer, a verbal staff report around the Healthy Communities Grant Application Guide.
Thank you, Mayor, and I apologize to council for not having a written staff report. I unfortunately ran out of time. It's way too much going on. But what I did want to point out is I did have a meeting prior to going to Vancouver last week with the Plan H Healthy Communities to talk about programs that we're already currently going to be running within the district of Port Hardy in order to support a healthier community. And so some of those things we've talked about are Mayor's Task Force, downtown revitalization. We've talked about bridging the gaps with services within the downtown. We've talked about safer places. These are all programs that are already currently happening under other programs and also within the capacity of staff. This is an opportunity for us to help augment that the funding that we currently have, which just announced today officially the REDIP funding was made available to the district of Port Hardy. And of that, we have about $5,000 to $7,000 that's been allocated towards building relationships and healthy communities and coming up with policies and directives in order to build a safer downtown. What I'm proposing is that we apply to the Plan H fund in order for $15,000 towards the policy commitment stream to help to bridge that gap and also identify the gaps that we currently have. So I know that the Mount Washington Health Network and Mental Health and Addictions has been doing that work, but just to take that a little further and to support that with the opportunities. Because one of the things that has been expressed to us in terms of housing and that housing continuum is that, you know, it's all fine and good to say that we need shelter, we need emergency pods, we need permanent housing, we need homeless shelters, we need transitional housing. But whether or not we actually have all of the pieces in order to support that type of housing, but also it's finding out who's doing more than they should be doing and who could be helping others. So it's trying to kind of create that gap analysis in order to support that. So what I would propose to council is that an application be submitted for up to $15,000 in order to support the REDIP funding as well as the AST funding that we've also had announced for the economic development to help support those healthier communities in town. So I'm open to any questions.
Councilor Smith?
Who would be doing the grant application?
I would talk to our wonderful Patty.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure that that's perfect. So everything can tie in together quite nicely. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So are you looking for direction from council on a motion to apply for the grant?
Correct. I need a motion to apply to submit with the grant application.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Robertson. I just have one comment. So I know in the past, with the Plan H grants, often communities don't get a second chance at that. So was that brought up at all?
It was. And so we have now passed that threshold of time in which we won't be considered. And because it's a completely different stream than what we've applied for in the past, the favorability is quite high. And pitching the project that we're currently working on, they were quite responsive to what we've
Okay, good. That's great. Thank you. So got a first and second, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. All right, so moving on, we have bylaw number 1160-2023, the Growing Communities Reserve Fund for adoption. So the recommendation is that we adopt the bylaw 1160-2023, moved by Councillor Dorwood, seconded by Councillor Tidbury. Any comments? All in favor? Yes, thank you. Moving to bylaw number 1161-2023, our financial plan bylaw for first, second, and third readings. So we had at our committee of the whole a presentation for our CAO, and so if you weren't here, it's being recorded, and you could watch the presentation in its entirety on our YouTube channel. And I want to thank our CAO for an amazing presentation, and our Director of Financial Services for all her hard work in putting it together. Doing it for the first time is a bit challenging. So thank you. And I guess the long and the short of it is that inflation right now is 6.69%, and our basic tax increase for our citizens is going to be 6.7. So our staff worked really hard going line by line item to try and keep it as low as possible. So as much as we dislike tax increases, unfortunately, we have to do a tax increase. So that being said, do I have a motion to approve it? Moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Smith. Any questions, comments?
Will the PowerPoint presentation be itself be available or only through watching the video?
We usually post it on our budget page.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put the video link and the presentation itself.
Okay, that's great, because
Yeah.
not everybody necessarily wants to watch the whole video, but yeah.
Okay. Those of you that are listening or in here, if you want to just look at the PowerPoint, it was very well laid out. It was very good to follow. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have no pending bylaws. Councillor reports. Councillor Dorwood.
Thank you. I attended the Community Consultative Committee meeting. One of the community members was led by Ross. He did a fantastic job of keeping us on the agenda, which is very easy to stray from. So that was good. We have another meeting on April 19th, and we're going to get through it soon.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Make sure it happens. Okay. And I also went to the pool, had a tour with also the rest of you, and it was great to see the liner coming along and talking directly to the contractor, who says they're currently on their time schedule. So that was a good reassurance. I managed to squeeze into the Easter Festival on the weekend that Fort Hague Recreation put on. At the very last minute, it was like 15 minutes left in it. It was still absolutely buzzing in there. Tons of kids, vendors, people, all sorts of stuff. It was, again, another fantastic event put on. When I popped over and saw the Lions handing out Easter candy to the kids, they do a great job of that every year, and it was cool. It was indoors to see how they do it. So thank you to the Lions, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Texmo.
I definitely want to second that. I took my little one to that event, and I had family in town that had 4 kids. My cousin has 4 kids, and we all brought everyone there, and it was amazing. The amount of different events they had set up to accommodate all these kids was staggering. I couldn't believe it when I walked in there. I know we echo it a lot, but I just can't say how good of a job they're actually doing there and putting on those events, and the weather that was going on this weekend was just amazing. It's great. I can't pat their backs enough for that. It's awesome. Other than that, I don't really have much to report other than the emergency committee meeting that we had that we touched on that, and that's about it.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I was sick there for a week, so back at her now, but just to report on a few things. Had the Heritage meeting. They're finalizing their budget. Things are looking good. Their gift shop is doing very well, and they're going to be increasing the travel budget for the curator to go to other places and conferences to get those contacts, which is great. So good things happening with them. I wasn't here last meeting and didn't get to report on that, but I really enjoyed that meeting with Telus, with Shay Draper. Like, it was just fantastic. And I even went and researched a couple of the programs that he was talking about for youth, and they were all there, and I got to share that with our workers as well. So that was I really enjoyed that. Bear Smart, we had some goodie bags, got those ready, and then I got sick right after that and missed our teddy bear picnic, which I think it was very well attended. There was 30 kids, 19 adults. Our parents were there, so I think it went very well. I don't know. Maybe later on when I learn a little bit more from it, but that was a very successful event. Good thing that Port Hardy Recreation was there to help us out. So incredible that we have a good group like that working for us. On the 25th, I got to attend the Willy Wonka's potlatch. It was an incredible ceremony, and they had morning ceremonies and dances there, and it was just really appreciated it a lot. It was excellent to be a part of that. And then, yeah, basically looking forward to this weekend. It'll be my first AVICC. So I know I've always just gone to UBCM. So it'll be nice to see our region first and everyone coming together and working together. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Councillor Dugas?
Thank you, Mayor. Just I know that Trina was unable to attend the VidTech meeting that we had, and there was a lot of great information with regards to what's happening with our tourism industry coming up this 2023 year. And Natalie and her group is doing a great job, and we really look forward to seeing things continually to improve in our region. Obviously, we had our first strategic planning meeting with the district, which was pretty exciting. Talking about all the different things that we're looking at for the next years in our our term. So that's awesome. Had a chance to talk to BC Housing a couple of times with regards to our North Island Seniors Housing Foundation project, and things are moving along as best that they can, I guess, and we'll just give you more updates later on as things continue to work towards a fall intake for BC Housing. The mayor and I had an opportunity to do an interview with the BC Salmon Farmers Association, which was pretty interesting, kind of like a last minute thing. But we also got an email today too from the BC Salmon Farmers Association. And there's some big concerns right now with regards to Minister Murray. What they're hearing is that she's considering to propose to the cabinet for a rapid phase out of all of the fish farms in the ocean on the West Coast. So they're getting kind of concerned about that, and they want to get together with those of us that are in support of the fish farm industry to sit down and obviously talk about what we could do next and put in letters. And I know that they're going to have some meetings with us here shortly. The other thing is that the mayor and I had an opportunity to attend the Economic Development Forum at Seven Hills on April 5th and 6th, but unfortunately, our mayor was unable to attend on the 6th because she had an accident. And we're hoping that she's starting to feel better. And it was great. It was great information. It was a lot of people from the ministry, actually, all the way up from Victoria, talking about how they can help us with grant applications, and not only that, approvals of different things that come up with regards to our area. And one of the things that they had on the 6th, excuse me, was they talked about the seaweed seaweed industry or kelp industry on the North Island, and there was a lot of presentations there with regards to the Seaweed Association of British Columbia, and then a number of different Cascadia. I know that they came up and did a presentation to us at one time with regards to how they could see those farms happening in our area. And we do have some wild kelp harvesting up in our particular area. Mark Peeler and his company actually did a little bit of a presentation on what they do. And some of the information that they provided was very interesting. And we're looking forward to that, obviously expanding in our area. So, and again, as Trina says, we're pretty excited about this weekend coming up, AVICC, getting to see everybody again in person. So that's going to be great. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Robertson.
Oh. Perfect. I was on another planet. It was very nice too, I have to say. I was similar to other people, went for a tour through the pool, with acknowledging BHP's contribution towards it. And the pictures I took were circulated through the neighborhood and well received, I have to say. There was the strategic plan. I think that was in the last couple of weeks, and as well as a table of partners meeting with the Warrington Regional Health Net. And I was not able to attend the Easter Fest, but most of my family attended, and they talked about it for a long time afterwards, I have to say. It was hugely well received. And also some discussions around the MAP. I sit on the MAP Marine Planning Partnership for the Pacific Northwest and Northwest Coast. And there is lots of planning activity around some of the marine areas. It's a busy file right now, so more information to follow on that.
Thank you. And so I'll just be very brief. I have much of my stuff interrupted. Oh, Councillor Tidbury, how did I miss you? Oh, my goodness.
I was
And you were in
surprised.
such a good mood.
I was. You try to get rid of me already.
Never.
So basically what I've done, I attended the emergency planning Port Hardy committee meeting. And like I mentioned before, we're talking about a tabletop exercise just with Port Hardy people. And it's also going to be around the marina area. So that's in the works. I attended the NERAPSI meeting, which is the same thing for the emergency meeting, but only at the regional district level. And this discussion was about more cooperation between agencies and how we can all work together. One of the concerns was the ESS. It's still called that now, isn't it? Okay. And how we're going to have to rely on other communities if there's a disaster in any one of those communities, that we can feed in from that. I had a tourism meeting. Okay, that went very well. I did the walk around. I did the Mount Washington Health Network one. I had the Philomades meeting, and that's going along again. We desperately need volunteers. It's not looking that great right now for our volunteer section. And finally, my super seniors, once again, just working their hearts out to content. They're striving along. We're planning on more activities in the facility. And so there's gonna be more, probably down the line, more exercising and stuff like that. Where the membership drive right now is going well. They got new members that they're on the way up to nearly 300 members now. So it's, and we have a good drivers there that as soon as you come in the door, you get forced to be a member, so. But it does have its benefits. And that's basically it for me. I'll hand it back over to the mayor now. I'd love to hear from the mayor.
I'm sorry about that, Counselor Tidbury. So I attended, as Counselor Dugas said, many of the meetings that he was at and that others were at, and I think I'll just divert ever so slightly and thank our CAO and staff for the amazing job they've done in putting in grants. I don't know if anyone caught the little comment that we can now officially announce that we got the REDIP grant, which is courtesy of our CEO applying for it through our ACTEV person, as well as ICE-T grant, so that our economic development can go ahead and try and make things better in this community. So amazing windfall for the our citizens in our town. And we have known for a little while that we've got the REDIP grant and the ICE-T grant, but we couldn't officially say anything. So our economic development person helped put together a PowerPoint for me to present at the Economic Development Forum the other day. And it was, you know, things were asterisks, grant dependent. And so it'll be really nice to be able to go forward and start getting these projects done. So thank you. One of the things they said though, when I did the presentation and I said about business audits on committees or on businesses or societies or whatever, one of the business people in the audience said, usually the term audits strikes terror in a business. And so we might want to change the term audit to a different name. That's really good feedback. As someone who's not a business operator, I hadn't even thought about that, but makes total sense. And having the presentation from the Numgees Business Development Corporation was pretty impressive what they are doing over there. And one of the things that's a benefit to the whole North Island, well, it's all a benefit to the whole North Island, but really a tangible one for so many people is their driving school. And their driving school will come to Port Hardy or to Port McNeill or wherever. And as well, on Saturday, there was 5 people that came down specifically from Clem-2 to take driving. And I just thought that outreach and that flexibility is amazing. So I thought that was very, very cool. Thank you as well to our Director of Recreation and her team. The Easter Festival, as we echoed around here, was very impressive. I couldn't stay for a whole long time, but really enjoyed it while I was there. And I think that's about it for me. So thank you. All right, information and announcements. There's a few little things that we could add on there. April 19th, the Deputy Mayor and myself will be having a brown bag lunch that'll be here. And so if anyone wants to come and just ask some questions or be a little bit more informal, you're more than welcome to.
What time that, man?
Well, noon.
Noon.
Thank you. I look over at the real boss over there.
I thought it was noon, but
So at noon. And as well, and this will be past our next meeting, but on May 5th, it's Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. And this year it will be out at the big house at Saki's at Fort Rupert. And so by next council meeting or fairly soon after, I should have a poster and kind of been copied on all the information in the organization as well. And I just want to highlight April 21st, so looking for volunteers to come and help out with the Pitchin community cleanup. I'm gonna be there with a broken wing, so I'm hoping there'll be more people there too. Okay, notice of in-camera meeting, we have none on the agenda right now. Motion to adjourn. Counselor Textron, thank you. Any questions?